I think that what humor allows you to do is it allows you to diffuse some of that tension without having to sacrifice any of the information.
Let's think more about the message you're trying to get across, and then make the humor something that brings people in instead of pushes people away.
I think a lot of what we try to focus on with our videos is where can we find the joy in difficult moments.
Hey y'all, welcome to another episode of Hello Merge Tag, a podcast about social media, politics, and where they intersect. We check in with candidates, consultants, strategists, and more to find out what's working and what's not in the political digital world. I'm your host, Josh Clemens of Reverbal Communications. We help progressive campaigns and organizations win the internet. Have questions you want answered on the pod? Have a guest or topic recommendation? Just want to say hey? Drop us a line at hello@reverbalcommunications.com. Find all episodes at hellomergetag.com or wherever you stream podcasts. Now let's dive in. Look out, Facebook. Now you can drive website visits directly from Civic Shout. Introducing Express CPC, Civic Shout's new cost-per-click ad system. Everyone already knows that Civic Shout's the best way to grow your opt-in email list. Folks like M&R, Greenpeace, and Feeding America stand by it. So can you. Grow your list and run traffic campaigns that hit so hard, your team will wonder how you did it. Environmental Action called Civic Shout a wildly better way to grow your email list. And Clarify Agency saw a 200% return on ad spend in just 2 months. Civic Shout, the ad platform for progressive causes. Head to civicshout.com/partners to learn more. That's civicshout.com/partners. Hey y'all, quick note before we dive in. If you're enjoying this podcast, please consider leaving a review on Apple, Google, or wherever you listen. We're also putting every episode on YouTube now, so if you prefer your digital deep dives with video, head on over that way. You can find all links plus lots more at hellomergetag.com. And if you're already watching on YouTube, hey, apparently I am legally obligated to say, please like and subscribe. So go ahead and do that. Okay, thanks, y'all. Back to the show. I met Mark Kendall and Bill Worley at Netroots this year and was super excited to invite them on the pod. They're doing something very unique in our space, using comedy intentionally to win hearts and change minds. Their firm, CoolCoolCool Productions, and that's one word if you're wondering, is an Atlanta-based production company and boutique agency that uses comedy to encourage civic engagement and foster community. Their videos have racked up tens of millions of views across social media. They've been featured on NPR and in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution and named Best Reason to Laugh by Atlanta Magazine. I went to a session they ran at Netroots, and every example they shared hit harder than the last. Thought, smart, hilarious work designed to move people. So Mark and Bill, thanks so much for coming on the pod today. Let's start at the beginning. How did CoolCoolCool Productions come about? Tell us your origin story.
Oh yeah. Well, first off, Josh, thanks so much for having us, and thanks for that super kind intro. That's super fun.
Oh, yeah. Hell yeah.
Yeah. Great question in terms of how CoolCoolCool started. Bill and I both were comedians in the Atlanta area. We had, been friends and known each other through comedy for a long time. I've known Bill for probably about 15 years at this point. And, we were working on a particular comedy show together where I got the, great privilege to work on a video with Bill, and I got to see him direct and shoot and edit. And I'm like, yo, this guy's amazing. And so I asked him, like, hey Bill, would you want to do another video? And he fortunately was like, yes. And so we shot a sketch about the lack of public transportation in Atlanta and the challenges that Atlanta has faced in public transportation spreading to the suburbs. So we shot that video. It was a great time, and the world shut down like within the next couple
February
of weeks.
2020.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. It may have been the last weekend in February, I want to say, that we shot that. And so like by the time we had it edited and things like that, we were all in our homes. But eventually we put it out later that summer. It got a lot of great traction. And I guess just to condense the story a little bit, we kept doing it. And then people really appreciated our brand of humor and how we blended elements like, civic engagement, speaking specifically to the issues, touching Atlanta. And it eventually, just out of necessity, we had to create the production company. So I might be leaving details out, but
I've never heard this story, right?
Yeah. I was like, I think now's the time to tell Bill this podcast.
Yeah. Mark Kendall is such like an epic, amazing talent and a legend in Atlanta, and just such an amazing creative. And so, like Mark said, we met doing comedy, and the show that he mentioned earlier was called Magic and Bird, and it was a really hilarious show. Our friend John put together that was Magic Johnson and Larry Bird having a rivalry and just the silliest stuff. And I'll never forget the moment Mark Kendall asked me if I wanted to do more videos, because I was like, oh my God, absolutely. And I come from a background, you know, so I did comedy, and I worked at agencies for a while and doing like commercial and video work. And the same time I was doing that, I was doing improv comedy and a lot of really crappy sketches for years and years and years. And it took, I think, going through all of that to get to the point where working with somebody like Mark, kind of honing your voice, honing those skills. And we just kind of got together at, I think, just a magical time of February 2020. And we're able to really make it work. And it's been an absolute ride and really fun. And getting to meet people like you, Josh, and it's a real honor to be here to talk with you and to do what we do.
Yeah, hell yeah. No, that's awesome. A lot of your work tackles really heavy topics. Y'all deal with racism and disinformation and voter suppression. How do you balance humor with gravity when the subjects are so serious? And let's start there.
Well, I think humor is can be a really helpful way to deal with, you know, more difficult topics. Because they are difficult, I think, you know, there's tension when you bring something into a room, whatever the difficult topic is, like vaccine hesitancy, like why haven't you gone to get your vaccination? Stuff like that's very personal, you know, can really like get at you emotionally. And so all that to say is that tensions can be raised. And so I think that what humor allows you to do is it allows you to diffuse some of that tension without having to sacrifice any of the information. You know what I mean? Like, so you can raise tension, use a joke to diffuse that tension, and then because that tension's diffused, you can kind of like keep the conversation moving forward, as opposed to being like, oh, we introduced this tension, now I got to back up. Like the way that we like to use comedy at Cool is to use humor as a tool to like forward that conversation, you know, to progress that conversation forward.
I'm curious if do you get pushback both in the room, but also like in the world, like in the comments, or maybe you're healthy enough to not read the comments. But do people find that it's like inappropriate, quote unquote, to use comedy when dealing with heavy subjects? Or does comedy just cut right through the bullshit and let people like have real conversations about harder topics? Like as somebody who like actively works in this, like what's your take on that?
You know, I feel like we've just lucked out. We've had a lot of stuff do really well. And you know, Mark, I'm trying to brainstorm. There's not a comment that keeps me up at night that I can think of. And I think, just like Mark said, that humor diffuses a lot of, you know, people coming at and just attacking a concept and idea because they're seeing the humor, they're being more open. Luckily, we haven't had to deal with that at all. I've dealt with people being mad at jokes I've made on stage that didn't have anything to do with politics, and had people come up in my face after a show, but I've never, knock on wood, to my knowledge, Mark, I don't think we've had a lot of pushback on our stuff.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think it might be helpful for us to clarify too, is that we also do kind of like a particular style of comedy, meaning, you know, we will go straight at difficult topics, but we try to be careful about like, well, who's the target of the joke, or what is the target of the joke? So a lot of times people might hear comedy and think like, oh, you're gonna roast someone, or I mentioned vaccines earlier. It's like, do you roast people that are afraid of like, you know, going to get a vaccine? It's like, that's actually what we try really hard not to do, is that we, you know, I feel like there's many different types of comedy. So many of them are vital, but I think a lot of what we try to focus on with our videos is where can we find the joy in difficult moments. And I think that resonates with people. And I think that because we are careful about trying to use joy as, you know, the brand of comedy that we do, simultaneously, not intentionally, but simultaneously, it also doesn't really like lead to a lot of arguments in the comments like that. So I think that might also contribute to it.
Yeah, I was going to ask, like, I mean, obviously I have not seen your full body of work, but I saw some really solid pieces at Netroots, and I wouldn't even, it wasn't even a question of punching up or punching down, because you were really like punching through. You were really trying to like, and I think it would be helpful probably if you gave like, describe some of the videos instead of me trying to do it for you. Like if y'all wanted to like describe maybe the one you did about the Atlanta transportation or the Bob Ross piece, because I think it's like helpful to have people understand it. But yeah, do you, like so much quote unquote comedy, especially on Twitter, but on the internet in general right now, is focused on punching down. It's like finding one thing about a person and attacking them for it in politics. Like we see so much negativity that I'm sure a lot of these people think are hilarious, but really what they're doing is just like destroying the fabric of the universe every day. You know, like every time they log on, it's like, how can I make fun of this person? How can I tear this person down? So I am curious, like, it's the stuff I saw didn't involve any people. It involved concepts, right? Do you all ever get asked to do things about politicians or specific candidates or things, or it's always focused on concepts? And then, yeah, maybe take that as an opportunity to describe a couple of these videos that I had the got to watch at Netroots.
Sure, yeah. Well, you were asking about the MARTA video that we had described earlier, so I can maybe describe that one to start.
Sure.
You know, we're based out of Atlanta. Our public transportation system is called MARTA. Historically, it's had an issue with spreading to the suburbs. A lot of the root causes of that are racism. And so a common narrative that you would hear if you grew up in Atlanta was like, oh, I don't want MARTA. I don't want the train to come to my town because I don't want crime to come to my neighborhood, which is like code for black. And so the sketch that we did was we were like in a fictional version of Atlanta where all of a sudden MARTA finally came to Cobb County. It's the live version of the show that actually had done years before. It actually kind of came out of a separate thing. Quick tangent was like when the Braves moved from, the city of Atlanta to Cobb County, I was just like, oh, I bet now they will build MARTA to Cobb County. That didn't happen in that way, but
okay.
Anyway, so little side thing for people that are listening that are from Atlanta. Anyway, but
I went to college in Georgia, so I didn't ride MARTA often, but we made it into town here and there.
Yeah,
for sure.
But for the purposes of the video, we set it in a fictional version of Atlanta where, hey, MARTA all of a sudden did come to this suburb of Cobb County. And so now that's finally happened, we are finally taking black crime to Cobb County. And we're going to describe step by step, like what would actually be involved with, I don't know what happened with my camera here.
Yeah, your camera got.
But
you're on fire, man. Like,
yeah,
this video is so good. Google Meet can't handle it.
We just started describing step by step what would actually be involved in someone hopping on a subway system, taking a bus, walking however many miles to get to whoever's house in the subway,
to steal a piano, right?
Stealing a piano, walking it back to the bus stop, taking the bus back to the MARTA station. You know what I'm saying? And obviously, as I'm describing this, you're like, oh, well, this is ridiculous.
Right.
And I think what was helpful about that is that anyone could see that it was ridiculous,
right?
Whether you wanted MARTA to be expanded or not. And so I think that is a way of the comedy, in a sense, getting people on the same page, right? It's like, but then through that, you're like, oh,
well, I just want to add, there was a line in there that really stuck with me. Before this, all we could do was take our Escalade.
Right.
So, like,
yes.
It's like the crime, quote unquote, like, has, like the absurdity on the face of it, like just pops through when you like point out like how stupid it is,
For sure.
Yeah.
And so I think it's just kind of like using humor, using absurdity, one, to kind of like diffuse tension, but then also asking the question of like, well, what would we like to see? You know what I mean? Like, what would it really look like if we really did have, access to public transportation and people really could get from point A to point B? People would not be stealing your pianos. You know what I'm saying? Like, but it would be, it might be a society that is like, oh, that might be interesting, So a lot of people that enjoyed that sketch, I'm sure, are also people that maybe were not on board with MARTA, but they could at least watch that sketch and then be a part of the conversation about that sketch.
Right. And you mentioned, was that the first video y'all ever worked on, the one in February 2020?
Correct. Yeah.
So was that for a client, or was that just CoolCoolCool Productions looking for a cool project to work on?
That was just for fun. Yeah. So I had seen Mark perform that as part of a one-man show, and very much like Mark, like growing up in Atlanta, like there's that racism that has unfortunately prevented MARTA from reaching the suburbs. And it's a well-known fact. And the way that sketch just blasted the absurdity of that while making it so funny was really what's the word I'm looking for? Cathartic for I think an audience and a native Atlantan. And so, you know, loved that sketch. I was really nervous, honestly, when we decided to shoot that sketch, because it's one of my favorite sketches, and I was like, I really want to do it justice. And I think we lucked out. And we had a great crew. Jenny Whitling's a friend who drew the board that was representing the path they were taking, writing Switch and Change. We had a great gaffer, and then the crew was a bunch of improv friends that just really heightened the and we shot so much stuff. I think one of the things that is a great thing about working with improvisers and comedians is we can riff and we can do a lot of good stuff. I could have made that sketch 15 minutes. Of course, no one would probably watch it. It's still long at 4 minutes. I mean, 4 minutes, sure. I would not do a sketch today that's 4 minutes, but it holds you through 4 minutes because it has so many layers. But yeah, that was wildly the first sketch that we shot. And like Mark said, because we shot it end of February, we ended up not releasing it for a while because we just knew it'd get buried under, you know, everything else that was going on.
And so y'all worked on that on your own, but then like sort of pivoted to becoming like more of an agency than a comedy sort of, like you're not just a comedy production firm, you're also like an agency, right? You're working with advocacy organizations. So how did you go from like making one great video to like telling, how did you introduce this idea? Like you sort of have the double sell problem is my guess. Like folks don't know that they want to hire a comedy team to solve it. So you're not just selling that y'all are the right people, but like that people should be doing this. So yeah, how did you start that process? I'm very curious how you like entered into this like little ecosystem that we all now live in.
Yeah. I mean, I think we were fortunate in that there were other people in comedy that, you know, gave us opportunities early on that allowed for us to kind of like grow into the space that we're in now. So Bill, I'm reminded of, you know, one of the first people that approached us to work sort of like in the civic engagement space, but like in a slightly different way, was Steve Badeau, who, you know, was the showrunner at The Daily Show for a long time, amongst many other television programs. You know, he kind of caught wind of our stuff, like what we were doing. And around the Senate runoff that was happening in Georgia in 2021, you know, he's like, hey, you know, what if y'all did some get out the vote content? Oh. And, you know, that also did really well in Atlanta. And it was folks like him approaching us saying like, hey, I like what y'all do with comedy. And, you know, this joyful comedy was very much a powerful kind of like counter programming to all the negativity that was that people in Atlanta were just being inundated with, like calls, texts, you know, doom and gloom stuff all the time, all through people's feeds. And this is also as we're going through a pandemic. So this kind of like bright, uplifting comedy, I think, worked really well in that space. But it was people like Steve, you know, saying like, hey, I've got some funding. Let's do some videos with this. And then from that attracted more clients, and that attracted more clients. So yeah.
A lot of it, I think, was, yeah, us, you know, taking the success of that, talking to folks. Janine Abrams, Rebecca DeHart at Faircount are some amazing people that I'm even forgetting how we first connected with them, Mark, if they reached out to us or we reached out to them.
I want to say it may have been through Ann Kramer. Maybe.
Ann Kramer, who's
yeah.
Ann Kramer, the human exclamation point, yeah. One of the most amazing people here in Atlanta, and a real advocate for the community. And Insay Ufat over at what at the time was at New Georgia Project was another person who saw the work we were doing, and we were able to have that conversation. We've been really lucky in that we've been able to network and meet people through this small community of nonprofits and organizations here in Atlanta. And I think a lot of that has to do, like Mark was saying, with Georgia being just a real center of the political sphere, with Warnock and Ossoff and the runoff and you know, going for Biden and becoming kind of a purple state. You know, hopefully we can get
I live in Wisconsin. I know the feeling well.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, Wisconsin, Georgia, North Carolina. There's only a few of us left that are truly like, you know, focused on. Okay, so it's an interesting example, and I'd love to dig in. So blank sheet of paper. You have somebody reach out and they're like, the goal is turn out the vote. The world is literally falling apart. COVID had just started. There's this runoff that literally democracy hangs in the balance of. Unfortunately, we lost that fight, but like not the runoffs, but you know, a couple years later. But blank sheet of paper, how do you start something like that? And like walk us through, because I think there's a lot of campaigns and organizations out there that only see the dark and don't see like a way out, you know? So I'd love for you to offer any like advice, like what does the process look like to find the comedy in a very dark moment and say, okay, but like comedy actually matters if you want to reach people in a different way. So yeah, blank sheet of paper. How did you approach the Get Out the Vote campaign that you worked on in 20 or 21, excuse me?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it when we're starting to work with anyone, a lot of it is listening. So it's like we realize that we're the comedy experts, but we're fortunate enough to work with groups that know their audience really well, that know their messaging really well. So I think a lot of it is just hearing from them, like, all right, what story are you trying to tell? Who are you trying to talk to? What do you want them to ultimately do after seeing a video, you know? Right. So it's like we realize we can make a lot of things funny, but if we're not like on the same page and very clear about how to make that audience, you know, and message as impactful as possible, the comedy matters less. So a lot of it is just like listening to whoever it is that we're working with to make sure that we're on the same page about where to even start there. And then I'd also add in terms of just like how you find the comedy in anything, how you find the joy in anything. I think so many cultures is based off of like going through difficult times, trials and tribulations, and people find laughter, people find joy. So this is not anything that's especially new. You know, we're just maybe asking you to tap into that in, you know, a slightly different context, which is like, you know, a comedy social media video, you know, where people's feeds are on fire, as you said. Some questions that we might ask sometimes to kind of like try and figure out how to get there are things like, you know, what do you want to see in the world? What do you want people to know? You know, and that can sometimes be a good starting point, because then from there we can find like what are the kernels of joy in this process, and from there we can pitch ideas. I realize there's probably more, but Bill, what do you think? Yeah.
Well, I think like just using, I think Josh, you're talking about like an example of something. So I think a good example that you mentioned earlier was the Bob Ross sketch, where like with Fair Count. Fair Count came at us and they're like, hey, gerrymandering going on. Gerrymandering is not a fun topic. How do we make it funny? How do we make it, you know, help educate people about what it means and what it does to their communities? And when we brainstormed, you know, we had a couple ideas, and one of them was Mark is Bob Ross, painting a very happy Atlanta, Georgia, and showcasing a lot of the things that make Atlanta, and then, you know, paintings, doing some redlining, and describing in his very amazing Bob Ross impression about the damage that does. Another thing that we did for that campaign was have a class president sketch. So we had a classroom full of actors, you know, playing kids in elementary school, and the kind of jerk kid made it 2 districts for him and 1 district for everybody else, and he won class president. So we tried to make it, okay, what's relatable, what are some fun ways to come at that topic that make it more engaging and help people understand, like, if this is true, what else is true, is an improv and a comedic language to try to see, okay, are there other situations where if we applied what's happening in the political landscape, like Mark was saying, with robbing people on public transportation, that can help you point out the absurdity of things. That's just one way that we've been able to do it, but that can sometimes be a great way to come at adding comedy into otherwise serious topic.
Yeah, let's talk formats and platforms. Obviously, like a lot of social is actually text first, you know, when we look at like Twitter or Blue Sky Threads, or like also like graphic, you know, memes and whatnot. So I am curious, like, do you think that is video integral to what y'all do? Obviously comedy can happen outside of video, but like, is your first like art form? Do you ever veer outside of it? And do you see folks like using non-video formats effectively, in your opinion, for this type of work?
Yeah, I mean, I think our primary, thing that we like to do is video. I guess another thing I'll also add out there that we also do podcasting. We also do live comedic performances as well. But I'd say that, when we're doing our cool thing, is primarily video, because that's, I think what we enjoy most. That said, though, I mean, it's just like on other gigs, done memes or like videos where it's like meant to be read, assuming that people are following without any sound on there. And so those are also very powerful. But, in terms of what we tend to focus on in our day-to-day is video.
I think that comes from us being performers as well. In part is, I think we're used to being on stage. We're used to being in front of an audience. And so translating that to a digital audience, it was a little bit, and I'm a nerd for video and been making videos a long time. I think we're both big fans of that. I think, there's a lot of writing that we do, but as people with improv background, we love to improvise. I think video is a great medium for that. So that's probably why we focus more on there. But all the shout outs to all the great writing going on out there, because there's a lot of it.
I'm also curious, though, you actually alluded to this, like how like all the videos that I saw at Netroots were like quite long for, the TikTok world. I mean, 4 minutes, you can do a TikTok that's 4 minutes, but so many TikToks these days are shorter. How do y'all find length? Like, how do you approach like this new world where folks want to see things that are 30 seconds long, not 5 minutes long? Do you just put long form content out and trust that it'll find its audience, or are you like adapting to that in like different ways?
It's funny. I think that original sketch, I would say, Mark, curious what you think. I think probably 90% of the stuff we do is usually 60 seconds or less in terms of comedy stuff now. And that's, to your point, Josh, like people don't have the attention spans to watch a 4-minute video on an IG reel or whatever. A lot has changed in the last 5 years. So we're absolutely, we try to think about in 30-second, 60-second, sometimes 15-second increments, unless we're doing like a more long form piece, because a lot of times it's funny. I know we did that 4-minute sketch. A lot of times now we're trying to even tell clients, no, let's not do 2 minutes. Let's do 60 seconds, because
like clients want you to go longer and you're like, no, shorter.
Sometimes, yeah, definitely. And I think where that happens a lot with people is they're just trying to get a lot in to a message. They're trying to squeeze a lot of information. And really in a video, you can really maybe get 1 point across, maybe 2 points, instead of your 17 bullet points, right? So it's you
just sound like a person that needs 17 videos, my friend, right?
Exactly. And it's like you want to help as much as possible, but part of that is just education too, like we learn from the clients, like what they need, what are they trying to do, and we're teaching them about our medium a lot of times, like what was most effective in video and in comedy. So it's back and forth for sure.
Are y'all consulting and like helping clients figure out how to do this on their own, or it's mostly you're a production company, like they're bringing you in to actually like collaborate and create content? Because I don't really know. Again, I keep coming back to this. I've been in this space a long time. I don't know anybody else who does comedy first in the progressive space. Like, I think y'all are unicorns. Maybe I'm wrong. Like, if y'all know other people doing this, like, let me know. I know very funny people in our space. I don't know anybody who's like comedy first in our space. And I guess that's like what I found so interesting about what y'all are doing. There's plenty of like, I mean, like how Mom Donnie's team, Melted Solids, like the stuff they're doing is amazing. And some of it is hilarious, but they're not like a comedy team. They're a video team using comedy to help their videos cut through. Y'all are like comedy first, production second, right? I mean, is that a fair way? Or, comedy first, messaging second, but you using them together. So yeah, I guess I'm curious, like, are y'all bumping into other people in the space that are like living in this progressive advocacy space as a comedy first company or firm?
I would say maybe not so much comedy first firms, but I mean, like, there are a lot of folks, awesome comedians in Atlanta that we make content with or are making their own content that is very much advocating for all kinds of really important things and using comedy to do it in that way. But
they're doing it like on their own, like not.
I wish we had more because I would like a lot, to Mark's point, like there's a lot of good friends of ours who have been very successful. Our friends at St. Andre Golf, you know, like a lot of great sketch comedians who love golf, started a golf channel. They've since like had Tiger Woods on and are just blowing up. But obviously that's tricky, right? Because if they get too political, they can alienate their sponsors, et cetera, et cetera. And they're great dudes, and we share very similar ideologies. But I think I haven't found a lot of folks, besides when you think about like the Daily Show or you know, Colbert, or kind of the people that are out there doing those type of shows. But if y'all are out there, let's talk. Anybody that's doing similar stuff,
hell yeah,
would absolutely love to talk to y'all and brainstorm. Yeah.
I sort of stepped on my first question, but do you consult for clients, or it's really just like partnering with to create content together?
Yeah, we consult. Yeah, we consult with folks that need. I mean, ideally for what we do, it's kind of like we'll concept with a client, we'll write it, cast it, shoot it, edit it. So we kind of do the whole thing. So if folks are interested in like, you know, getting something that has our brand of comedy, it's helpful for us to also produce that. But that said, we realize like, you know, that may not always be a fit for what someone needs. And there's so many great organizations out there. So we've also consulted as well, even if it's just something like, oh, we're thinking about this idea and we want to think about it comedically. Could you give any thoughts? We've done calls like that before, and other things too.
So, and we're both improv teachers. We both taught a lot of improv. So a lot of times we'll come in and do workshops to kind of like highlight how humor can break things up and make things so much easier, especially with a group of people that don't know each other, right? Can really help break the ice. I think one thing that's tough with people, and Mark alluded to it earlier, I think a lot of times people early on in comedy especially will tend to punch down because it's just kind of like and it's just a learning process, right? You're starting comedy, it's an easy way to get laughs. It's kind of like the quick thing. So I think a lot of times we're working with clients and stuff that they might think would be a good joke. We're like, well, let's think more about the message you're trying to get across and then make the humor something that brings people in instead of pushes people away.
The reason I ask is because I think there's a lot more organizations out there than y'all could possibly work with. And like, you know, like there's nobody else doing this, like I said, like that I know of anyway. So, you know, I think a whole lot of orgs and a whole lot of campaigns like could benefit from understanding how to, not punch down, but to like punch through, right? Like using comedy as a way to get at the heart of an issue that can actually like change people's minds about things. Like, I don't know, I didn't see polling on how your Atlanta, you know, transportation video did, but my guess is it literally changed some hearts and minds, right? Like there were probably folks who were like, we don't want these, you know, the subway here. And then they saw that and you're like, that's so stupid. Yeah, of course. Like, it's like so dumb. Like, you know, I had this preconceived notion and like you broke through it, which is so hard to do in this day and age. And comedy is one of those things that can do it. So that's why I ask in that context. So on that front, for folks listening, especially those working in campaigns, nonprofits who are curious about using humor, but don't have a comedy background, like, how would you recommend they approach this? And maybe the answer is take an improv class and, you know, take it from there. But like, you know, how a blank sheet of paper, you're not in the room. How does a nonprofit, a campaign, an organization going through a difficult subject, what's the first thing they should do if they want to like find that kernel of joy and figure out how to bring that kernel of joy to life through video or any other medium? Like, how would you approach that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, some things that come to mind for me is, you know, if you're starting from like a blank sheet of paper, one place that might be fun to start with is just kind of like what's a perfect scenario look like for you? So what's a world where whatever issue it is that you're dealing with, what's the perfect scenario, the rainbows and butterflies and puppy dogs scenario of whatever it is that you're aiming for? What's that look like? And then maybe working backwards from there, because some of those answers might be, you know, fun comedic sketches that also get people excited about whatever it is that you're trying to do. So I'll just maybe we could even do as an exercise. Is there some like issue that jumps out to you, Josh? And I'll do like a comedic.
Well, maybe it's too dark, but ice in Chicago.
Yeah, for sure. Ice in
okay.
Chicago. So it's just kind of like, so it's just like people in Chicago, and it's just like, what's an ideal world where it's like, you know, ICE isn't messing with Chicago, and instead of like people coming to take people away, there's like amazing connections or something like that. Maybe you think of like a beautiful family reunion where all these amazing, you know, intergenerational connections are happening, and there's music and there's food, kind of like the opposite of whatever it is that ICE brings. That starting with that image or something like that, like how do you get to that point, or explaining how you get to that point, could be something very interesting or engaging for an audience. And I would also say, like, if you're not in comedy, don't even necessarily focus on trying to be like funny. Just like focus on like what's interesting to you, what makes you feel joyful or happy, and maybe start there. Because it's just kind of like, I think that, you know, some people write jokes, some people don't. But at the end of the day, if you're like getting at the truth of something, or, you know, you're being honest about something, you're being interesting about something, those are all gonna like hit very similar notes, and I think be effective in similar ways. So that, for me, when you throw that out there, that's kind of what I think. That's what comes to mind for me.
No, it's super interesting.
Yeah.
I thought, Bill, you were going to jump in, but
I think I just yes-anding everything Mark's saying, and I think as you alluded
good
to,
improv yes-anding for sure.
Yeah, and Josh, as you alluded to, I think, you know, taking sketch comedy classes, I'm always going to recommend an improv class for any human of all time. A lot of cities have a lot of great comedy scenes, and a good place to jump in and get started. I would recommend folks do that. I also realized I wanted to shout out C4AA, which is a Center for Artistic Activism, which is another organization that we've worked with that is amazing, and they not just comedy that they work on, but I would say, Mark, I consider them another organization that's doing some amazing stuff, including comedy for sure, that I would highly recommend working with and checking out if you're not already familiar with them.
Cool.
But yeah, I think taking classes, like, and also looking for inspiration in if you do like comedy, look at the sketches that connect with you, and that's another way you can kind of work backwards from things. Like, look at the premises. What's going on here? Like Mark said, are they working from a perfect world? Is there a big character? Like, see what you connect with, and then see how you can connect those with the topics that you're in.
So on the flip side of that, and we talked a little bit about like punching down and whatnot, but what do you think most political or like advocacy organizations are getting wrong when it comes to them trying to be funny online? Or nobody's trying enough, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I mean, it just feels so hateful to me. I mean, right now there's a lot of, like, you know, I think people, obviously on both sides of the aisle, but the right, you know, really punches hard, and, you know, some of it is, like, I hate to say that some of it can be funny, but it's funny in a really dark way, and then, to your point earlier, Josh, a divisive way where, like, you get your audience is laughing, everyone else feels like crap. So, man, who is doing it well? Because I think the Daily Show, you know, you have Jordan Klepper and folks like that, who he has said point blank, I'm not changing anybody's minds.
Right.
You know, when he's going out and doing the gotcha man on the street stuff, that's funny for me. And you know, like, but he knows that's not going to change hearts and minds. Yeah, so it's tough to try and find, you know, who's doing that well. Mark,
I would just share something is like, you know, embrace like specificity, you know, just like as a comedic thing. So I don't know exactly who I'm talking to with this, but it's just like a comedic touch point is like, instead of saying a car, if you say gray 1997 Honda Accord, like specifics will always get you further in comedy. And by extension, I think like not being afraid to get really specific about the story that you're telling and trying to talk to community as directly as possible. I think that'll help a lot. So, you know, we just spent a while at the beginning of this podcast talking about MARTA and all this stuff. When Bill and I first put that sketch out, I mean, like, we did not expect for it to get like the very broad reception that it did for people outside of Atlanta, but it did because it was so specific and because we were so specific to our particular, you know, situation in Atlanta. Someone in Buffalo could be like, oh, well, we're dealing with such and such. It's not the same thing, but because we were specific, people are able to like see what you're going through and then relate to it in some way. So just like as a blanket recommendation, I would say like try to be consistent and specific and less concerned about like, oh, did I get 1 million views? Because your audience may not really be 1 million people. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know.
Sure. Yeah, for sure.
Like, so instead it might be like, oh, having 1,000 people really love this thing that you did, that you talked about in your particular county or whatever. And that also has a lot of value too. So not knowing specifically what someone
Sure.
listening is working on, but that's just one thing I'd throw out there is embrace specificity.
I mean, it's an interesting example too, because like obviously like that video that we talked about is essentially anti-racism, like really, but that is so broad. But saying like you're against Atlanta opening up a subway station in this one neighborhood, is like such an easier way to like cut out the legs from like such a big issue. Like if you tried to make a video about racism, it might be funny, but there's no way you're changing hearts and minds, right? Like it would be a magic video. You'd win a freaking Oscar. But like you probably were able to move hearts and minds in that video because it was so specific that you were able to like sort of like topple some things that were on top of it. So I think that's really good advice. Like the more specific you get, the easier it is to actually like tackle something. And that one thing is definitely interconnected to a lot of other things. And even if the end goal is to like make the world a better place, like start with like opening a MARTA station in a neighborhood of Atlanta, like take it from there, because like good things can like filter out from there. I don't know. That's what I heard from that. So I really like it.
Cool.
How can folks keep in touch with y'all moving forward?
Yeah. So, you can reach out to us. Our website is CoolCoolCoolPro.com.
Okay.
You can reach us there. You can also check us out on LinkedIn, CoolCoolCool Productions. Mark Kendall, Bill Worley, we're both on LinkedIn. My Instagram, Mark Kendall Comedy. That's a great way to get in touch with me. Bill, anything else?
Are y'all doing comedy on LinkedIn? Is that happening? I didn't come across that in my research.
It's like keeping up. It's so funny because so much of what we do is for people's social media channels, but sometimes it's like keeping up your own social media thing.
Oh,
we do have friends that are like, y'all are the only reason I go on LinkedIn.
Hell yeah, I'm on LinkedIn all the time. I'll definitely connect with you. So.
Yeah, well, we need to be more on there too. But like, and our name's Bill at CoolCoolCool Pro or Mark at CoolCoolCool Pro. Just holler at us. And I think a big thing that we try to do is like, is connect to other people like you're doing, Josh. It's such a huge thing. And I think a big thing for us and why we've been successful, what we do is life's all about relationships and the quality of your relationships. So I think any way, even if we're not the right fit for organization, if we can connect you to some other friends or other folks that can help, we're always happy to have a conversation. And I think, using this comedy and thinking about things the way Mark was highlighting, specificity, thinking about, the future you want to see is such an important part of getting that message across in a way that people can walk away with hearing you and understanding you and hopefully voting for you or whatever you want them to do.
Changing their hearts and minds, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I love it. Well, thanks y'all so much for coming on. It was awesome meeting y'all at Netroots, and I've enjoyed continuing the conversation. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Josh. Appreciate it.
Appreciate you.
That does it for another episode of Hello Merge Tag. Thanks so much for listening. Know anyone who might appreciate this podcast? Please share it with them today. Find all episodes at hellomergetag.com or wherever you stream podcasts. Have questions or want to connect? Drop us a line at hello@reverbalcommunications.com. Until next time, keep on telling your story.